Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PEX Network's webinar with BigPanda. Today, our conversation is about stopping outages and saving millions by eliminating change-related incidents. I am Francesca DeMeglio, a producer at PEX Network, and I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed guests. Today, we have with us Adam Blau, VP of Product Marketing at BigPanda, and Jason Walker, Chief Innovation Officer at BigPanda. Before we launch into our conversation and I turn this over to our speakers, we have to do a little bit of light housekeeping. We're delighted to have a great audience with us, and we want you to participate in this conversation. So please share your comments, stories, and questions for Adam and Jason in the live chat. You can also click on the Q&A button below and use that to communicate with us. In the meantime, we would like to share a little bit about our agenda. I believe we're going to be talking about, obviously, the introductions of BigPanda and AI incident prevention. And then we're going to witness a great fireside chat between Adam and Jason. Again, all of you in the audience should participate in that. We'll talk about the challenges facing enterprises and the cost of traditional IT change management, which I know from talking to many of you online is an issue that you're facing. And of course, how agentic AI can reshape change processes. This is the hot topic of the moment. And finally, the conversation will round out with customer success stories of implementing an AI-based approach. We're really looking forward to this. Audience, at this time, why don't you let us know where you're joining from and get ready to ask those questions and share those stories. Adam and Jason, I will turn this over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Francesca. All right, welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you here to talk about change management, which is traditionally been challenging for enterprises or mid-sized enterprise or even small businesses in terms of trying to understand what change might introduce an incident within your operations. And this has been a topic that Jason, myself, and all at BigPanda have really been diving in deep for the past year or so. And I'm really excited to speak with you about this, what we've learned, and how you can rethink your change management process. Before we dive into that conversation, we do have a poll question that Francesca will set up that I think will help provide some context and some understanding to think about how you all are thinking about change and how it impacts your business, not from our perspective, but from the audience. So you'll see that pop up now. And the first poll is the frequency of incidents. How often do IT changes contribute to incidents or outages in your environment? Um, Feel free to respond here. I think they're coming in, and we'll give you maybe about 10 more seconds. You can imagine the Jeopardy background ticking down, and I think that's good. Okay. All right. So we have a few of you here said occasionally. Okay. So it's not a new phenomenon that you do experience, and some of you actually experience it pretty frequently. So that's great. So why don't we then dive in, Jason? Maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit, like your role at BigPanda and how you kind of came to the idea that change risk was something that AI can can help solve the problems that customers are facing now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to meet everybody. Jason Walker, I'm Chief Innovation Officer at BigPanda. I've been here 6 years. Prior to that, I ran IT operations at Activision Blizzard across all their games and titles for about a decade, and got intimately familiar with change processes across our network infrastructure, cloud environments. Really, change has always been a source of incidents, but it was kind of it was unavoidable. You have to execute changes in order to update your software or update your infrastructure, and there's no way around that. So you have to push changes. So how you do that and the measures you take to prevent them from causing problems we're really baked into all the human processes around ITILs, change management, and individual team processes because typically change comes at your production environments from a whole bunch of different engineering teams, whether it's security or network or infra or app dev. Um, there's lots of layers there, and they all have to execute multiple changes. And so it's a real source of, you know, if you've got good architecture, good monitoring, and great processes operationally, change remains the one thing that can bring you down from a
Mhm.
service availability perspective. So, my role at Big Panda has been to, Chief Innovation Officer. It's a very generic title. Um, but I've run our rapid prototyping and some of our engineering teams that are really using um, the new AI technologies that are out there and new ways of interacting with data from an AI layer um, to understand organizations much, much better and be able to do things that we could never do before. And um, Adam, just as the brief background of how we approach the problem is we brought the technology to some of our design partner customers and they said, "Can you do this?" And we
Yeah.
said, "We think we can." And then we put our heads down and built something that works for them in production. And so that's kind of the genesis and an
Right.
intro all in one.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great intro. Yeah, I think it's unique that you have, the practitioner, the executive level perspective from the practitioner side or from the enterprise side, but also as the innovation officer at Big Panda, designing solutions and products that actually solve the problems that you went through at Blizzard Activision. Um, I think when we think about the challenge with change at an organization, it's really not only just large enterprises, but it's also medium-sized businesses or even small businesses. Is that when things don't change within your IT environment, you can relatively easily predict what's going to happen. Like, you had servers, you have data centers, you have network switches. Things are not moving or changing very much, and software development didn't change that much. But then, of course, 20 years ago, this thing called the cloud came out and it revolutionized everything, how it worked. Innovation was in terms of how quickly you could spin up and spin down different servers or ephemeral environments. Enterprises realized that software became something you could sell, and that was an innovation, a differentiator. And changes would span not just the network, but infrastructure, applications, security. And there was this idea or concept that, you need to have like service mapping or you need to have some kind of dependency mapping to understand where you could anticipate or predict where a change might impact your IT infrastructure. And can you share a little bit in your experience, speaking from your own experience or working with customers, like how did they build up an infrastructure or how did they try to manage a high volume of changes where executives or product owners or business service owners were saying, we need to change, we need to innovate, we need to update rapidly, whereas IT is saying, no, we can't. We can't manage the risk. We don't know what's going to happen. So what do they set up in order to find a happy medium?
So it's a really dynamic tension there that you describe. IT knows that when you launch changes, chances are that's when you're going to break something because they know that um, your service mapping, your CMDBs, your dependency maps are not up to date and they're not accurate. But the longer you delay that OS update or that security patch, the more likely you are to have something bad happen due to a stale, you know, a stale app, a stale firewall, stale device, stale cloud environment. And so there's that tension. And the way they have chosen to manage it and the way ITIL directs is you set up a change advisory board, a CAB, and their job is to interrogate whoever is making every change at an organization and say, evaluate the change, evaluate the risk according to, whatever data they have available, whatever understanding they have available, and then either bless the change or say, hey, go back and try harder. It doesn't look right. And they try to enforce their process. Do you have rollback procedures? Do you do pre and post validation checks? All those things that you can do to put a little bit of insurance around the change. But
Hmm.
really, as environments got bigger and more complex, and you moved, like you said, to cloud and microservices architecture, and the pace of change because of all those independent teams trying to push and keep their apps up to date and trying to keep their whatever piece of the service they own moving forward, um, it really overwhelmed that very human process, which often could involve, the people making the change, but also I've heard as many as 80 stakeholders in that were attending these meetings
And
bi-weekly.
once a week, right? These
Yeah,
CAB meetings are happening once a week.
yeah,
80
and
people
you're
on that.
stovepiping that huge volume of change behind this very human process that wasn't very effective because um, at a certain point, if you're in that stakeholder role, you don't have very good understanding of the underlying architecture or the relative risks of making a certain type of change in the way that the technical leadership of the team making the change does. And
Hmm.
so what they started to do was evaluate the person. Do I trust this person to act responsibly in making this change? And then you get into all the bad human behaviors around, well, I'm always going to bless this guy and I'm always going to question this guy. And you'd have a whole bunch of biases there. Recency bias is a great one because maybe that network engineer 2 months ago caused a terrible accident with an update that he pushed, and you're never going to trust him again. And things like that intruded into what is supposed to be a fairly rigorous and very important risk mitigation process, just by necessity because they couldn't keep up with the volume coming through capably. So it
Yeah,
started to decay, I think, in terms of effectiveness. And that started 15 years ago. So it's
right,
just gotten worse since then because the pace of change has just continually increased. And that's what we see as customers because when you think about the economics of making changes, it's gotten cheaper and cheaper. We've built all these solutions to make, continuous integration possible, continuous deployment possible. We've gone to cloud infrastructure. We've abstracted all the layers in a service stack from one another so everybody can make changes independently. There's much less understanding overall of the entire system, and um, everyone is incentivized to update, patch, security vulnerabilities are coming thick and fast. Everything, OS updates come. There are very few companies that still do software versioning and very
yeah,
deliberate, biannual releases or something like that. Everybody is trying to push faster and faster. So that economic kind of cost of change went down and down and down. So change gets pushed more frequently. So it's exacerbating the problem over time. It's not, there's nothing in the system that is going to slow down that train.
right. I mean, this is not new. I mean, the cloud has been around for 20 years. This friction between I need to change, innovate, it's cheaper than ever, as you just said, versus IT, who needs to have a little visibility control. What have they tried to do? Was there anything like with data scientists? Were they trying to download all this information into Excel sheets and manipulate the data? I mean, what have we tried to do that to alleviate this pain?
They've tried a whole bunch of the kind of boil the ocean efforts to really understand your full dependency change. You have a whole bunch of human processes when you enter the change into a system. Highlight all of the CIs, all of the configuration items that are going to be impacted. They put a whole bunch of process around it to try to make it safer, to try to make it more explicit what was going to be changed. But those in this those don't reflect the actual state of the services. And people basically know their domain. They know their small area of the overall surface area that company has out there, but they don't know all the ripple effects of a change. So they're fundamentally unequipped to do that. And if you think about what would it take to actually analyze a change, You're talking a team of analysts because you want to attack it from every angle. Like historically, how good are these change processes from this team? How many incidents have they caused? What's their change success rate? What kind of metrics do we have around that? Like if you use Dora and some of the DevOps processes, you can get into that data, but it would take a long time to evaluate every change by just the historical aspect. Then you hit the topological. And let me look at the architecture and the service map and see what potentially is in scope for this change. And then there's a organizational, like the people involved and kind of their relative expertise, their tenure, all of the aspects of a individual contributor who's at a technical level got a certain capability. You try to evaluate that. It would take a team of analysts a long time, um, many days probably, to really do the due diligence around a change. Um,
Yeah.
and then stack them on top of one another. Uh,
Right.
layer 50 changes. Network teams making a change. I remember in the old days, oh, networks updating, everybody else tried to slide their change underneath that one. And so you'd end up with a big bang that happened on your production services. And often it wouldn't go well because there were unexpected interactions. And testing around that in um, sandboxes and staging environments, it's
Mhm.
never the same as production. And so even if you have a great process there, you will run into production grade uniqueness that you did not anticipate when making a change. It is really hard to simulate the scale and the kind of way things roll out if you're making a very even a very simple change across a large service with a huge edge, global presence and everything else that potentially affects thousands of devices or configuration items or users. And so
Right.
all of these things kind of conspire together to make it very, very difficult for an organization to actually execute the process as, good old ITIL directs them to.
Right. I think I want to provide a little context for the audience about how painful this process really is. In our white paper, De-risking IT Change Management, which we'll share a link to at the end of this conversation, we have some sources that kind of articulate and highlight the true pain of what change management is for IT. So several reports, like the 2025 State of AI-Assisted Software Development Report, states that 8% of all changes are cause outages. Another report, the configuration change trouble, another 2024, that a third of all incidents and outages are created by change. Gartner says all the greatest source of incidents come from change. The pain is real. And when you have, as Jason said, a major network change and shadow changes coming in, or other ones that are getting bundled in with it, and you can't trace and understand the impact or dependency across it in a large, complex environment, when you're basing it on the caliber of the person and how well they wrote their change request, and you're really just going based on intuition, I'm surprised actually that these figures are not more difficult and worse. So this has been something that traditional approaches using AI haven't been able to solve. And I guess we get to the crux of it, Jason. What changed? Why all of a sudden now is there a new way of thinking about how to manage change risk?
Um, Well, AI happened, and then we figured out, vibe coding came along, and all of those cursor agents and everything else um, enabled a much faster pace of software development. But what did they require? They required context. They required data and understanding of customer environments. And so what changed is that all of a sudden we didn't have to rely on a single system of record or a human-based process. We could ingest, index, vectorize, and graph all of the data across all of even your informal documentation, your chat threads, your RCAs, your postmortems, your change logs, as well as your CMDB, as well as build a map of who owns what and how do services interact, as well as all of your history, all of your operational history. We could ingest all of that, every incident you've ever had, and all of the work notes in those tickets that say, hey, this one was caused by change 1, 2, 3, 4, and it was a 4-hour incident, and the root cause appears to be this. In graph data systems, you can actually create a relationship between all of those things. And AI is incredibly good at interpreting both vector data and graph data in a way that the human mind can't really replicate. We can hold 9 to 15 short-term thoughts in our kind of upfront memory. An AI can consider thousands and thousands of dimensions and entities simultaneously. And so all of a sudden, we uh, gain the capability by combining AI with this IT knowledge graph, which is organization specific. We gain the capability to really have that team of analysts and investigators interrogate every change and do it in a minute or two, rather than the human speeds that it would actually take and the multiple layers that you would go through with people executing on this. No, the AI can actually do this and analyze it 6 ways to Sunday, every single angle on that, the people, the topology, the history, and what else is going on simultaneously, and do a very, very good job of saying, this is a high risk because, and this is kind of crucial for believability, this change is a high risk because it doesn't have a rollback plan, because this type of change has caused this many incidents of this duration in the past, because this relationship exists between the entity you're changing and all of these other services or elements of the service that might be downstream of that. And
Mhm.
so you would all of a sudden you could do it. And this is, I think, the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, he said AI is labor. This is an example of that labor getting put to use. You can now have a little virtual workforce that is able to, for every change you do, the thousands and thousands of changes that organizations do every week, every month, it never stops. Each one of them can go through this evaluation, and then we can make recommendations. Here's what you should modify about this change that you're trying to make in order to make it safer. And the vast majority, the good news is, the vast majority of teams are doing exactly what they should. They're very responsible with their changes. And we find 95% of changes are safe, low risk. Nothing bad is going to happen. But they're making so many of them that that top 5% really that will cause all kinds of hate and discontent for your customers.
Right, right.
And so it's a it's a critical new capability in my opinion.
Yeah, when I think about the IT knowledge graph, before it came out, when I was speaking with customers in IT, there wasn't a lot of interest or awareness that there was value in data. Like they receive tons of alerts and metrics and logs, and they have to manually go through it. But from a data engineering perspective, there wasn't a lot of like, oh, we can use this data to transform how we work. It's more like, how do we reduce all the inputs and how do we reduce all the noise so we can get a signal on what to focus on? That was really a big focus of AI ops for a long time, which was important. But now it's thinking about how do I gain knowledge of how my IT operations works, and how do I bring that into my daily work so I can learn from it? So what applications are related to each other? How do certain teams respond when they get a certain type of incident? What have we learned from past changes that we did? Like if we did a change and it caused an incident, what actions did we take to resolve it? Was that documented? It may have not been documented because they had to move on to the next one. The knowledge is there. I think that's the key thing I'm hoping the audience takes away is that even if it's not documented, how people responded, how they acted, what they learned, worked, what didn't work is there. It's just in different places, in different siloed teams, tools, in people's heads. And it can be harnessed, and it can be used now with vector, with RAG, with all the different ways of capturing that knowledge, and then used in agentic ways. And I think because we've done this for our customers and you've had that information, then we were able to do this kind of change risk analysis to say, okay, you have here customer 100 changes you're about to push out. Let's do an analysis of, well, have you seen a change like this before? What change is it going to impact? What system is it? Is that critical for billing or for something else? And we're able to kind of like think about how change risk works. So I think that's a good leeway, Jason. Maybe you can explain what does change risk now look like? What can you do with this in a kind of an enterprise platform?
In an enterprise organization, it's a very, very effective safety net because it doesn't interrupt any of your existing processes. All it does is you basically submit. We for our customers, we look at your change. We pull in all of your changes as you are scheduling them, as far in advance as you want to make it. And sometimes that's months, sometimes that's minutes, because you
Mhm.
figure out you have to do a change very, very quickly to push that. Security patch out there. Um, but then we run them through a series of AI evaluation layers, and we bounce it off of all the data that we've assembled in the ITKG. And really, we unconstrain that one constraint that organizations have, people's time. Now with AI labor in the picture, I'm not limited by people's time. So that developer who has all that domain expertise and has put it into multiple documents that he's tried to keep up, um, and in multiple chat threads with his fellow engineers. Um, we've ingested all that and brought as much domain expertise as we can to every single analysis we do. And we drop it through several layers, which we build a basically a graph replica of a context graph for the AI to understand the organization very, very deeply across those aspects I mentioned before, the historical, all of your operational history, the
Mhm.
topological, all of your architecture, your systems, their attributes, and how they relate to one another. Uh, and the organizational, which I think a lot of people miss, but which teams own what, and what is their operational history, and what are their operational methodologies, their processes they use, their CI/CD pipelines, what tools are they using, how do they monitor things? All of that gets baked into um, this context graph of the organization that we call the ITKG. We drop every change into that and say, hey, AI, you're super smart and can consider multiple dimensions simultaneously. Look at this change and analyze it across all those layers. And then we give our customers a specific, hey, you have certain things that you consider very important when it comes to managing change risk. And it's almost the collected knowledge of that cab, of that board of, maybe 80 stakeholders. They put their collective kind of viewpoint in there and say, evaluate the change according to these criteria as well. And then we score it. And then we say, across everything, here's how much information we have about it, because that's always very important to say how well do you understand a certain area of your overall surface area. Um, and then we evaluate that change, and then we deliver a report that says, here's how we here's how we rated it, here's how our AI evaluated it, and critically, and this is kind of the actionable part, here's what you need to do to make it safer, if you need to make it safer. And
Mhm.
this is based on kind of very um, rich experience now at this point, because we've been live for over a year with some organizations. And we've seen when they ignore our advice, our systems advice, our products advice, and they will push a change that they consider low risk, but that we considered high risk. And we've seen the fallout from that. And through that bitter experience, then they learn to believe this safety net that is, it's very low touch, which is hugely beneficial. But of course, it's easy to ignore. Um, and so, now they're starting to shift the actual workflow to rely on this as the kind of primary. and listen to it, and then rejected a proposed change, send it back to the team, say, hey, make these changes, make these modifications to it, and then you'll be safe and
Mhm.
things will go well, which is a very easy, it's very actionable for everybody involved because you have that central IT team that's just trying to keep services running. Like that's their whole job. Just keep things running smooth for that business's customers. And then you have all of those independent, distributed teams who actually own different pieces of the business's online services. And they're trying to keep up with everything from security to competitive development, features, functions that they're trying to push, migrations from this cloud to that cloud because everybody's always transforming one way or another, and just, keep up, improve latency. They're always improving things. And so they don't have a ton of time. They need very specific guidance. And so we give them that guidance to say, here's what you need to do. Here's what you actually need to modify, and then you can keep doing your job, which is what all of these people, I mean, that's baked into almost everybody's, they're builders or they're operators, and they just want things to run smoothly. And so it's great when you can give them very clear guidance, and um, it's not just a, yeah, this is high risk, figure out why, good luck. That's kind of a non-starter in large
Mhm.
enterprise. So
Right. And also
yeah,
be able to delineate how you came to that. What proof do you have to kind of build that awareness? I think I would just add to what you said is that we know, companies already have their ITSM solution. They already have their infrastructure and their tooling and platforms in place. This is augments. It's not a replacement. So it's not like we're replacing an ITSM. This is just a layer of reasoning on top of the static information that you have. So it's augmentative to how you've been running the static generation of information that you have into a dynamic reasoning of the knowledge that you have. And I think that's an important concept because a lot of our customers don't want to reinvent how they've deployed things. They don't want to reinvent ITSM. This is a way of making the process better, not changing the process.
yeah. In a lot of ways, it allows the process to function the way it always should have. Just we were limited by labor. Like we didn't
Hmm.
have free AI labor out there able to do the act go to the actual depth that you need to. Um, and now we do. And so finally, if I'm on a cab at some massive enterprise out there, I can finally do my job and do it I can actually spend the time on the changes that are highest risk now and understand why, and then do the process improvement to prevent them in the future. And the great thing about developing software like this, I can tell we have just an awesome team of developers on this. Um, they're all doing this as part of delivering mission critical software to large enterprise. So we use our own, every bit of this is kind of steeped in good development practices. And they had to dog food this internally before they could ever deploy it at large enterprise. And so all of those little things to make it actionable, to make it a good experience for everybody involved in the change process, they've baked that into it. And so all those UIs and interfaces, and kind of the way the AI speaks and gives, credibility and establishes kind of here's what I know and why I believe what I believe about the risk of your change. All of that is baked into the experience, and I think um, that just makes it more effective because it could be very dry and procedural and bureaucratic if we let it, and that
Hmm.
is not generally effective because when I look at very bureaucratic processes, my eyes kind of glaze over, and I pay less attention, especially if I've got a very important job of developing new software or keeping my infrastructure up, secure and up to date. Um, I'm going to focus on those things because those are real, not just bureaucracy or administrative tasks.
Well, I think that's a great leeway into how this has actually helped our customers transform. You work very closely with our customers in the team, and maybe I thought you could share what you've learned. Like, what
Yeah.
if our customers, we've been live for over a year. Like, tell us anecdotally, what have you learned? I have a slide here as an example, but I'd love to hear like the in-between parts that you've learned and that would be some great takeaways for the audience.
Yeah. So I think kind of big picture, if you look at that young lady on the left, large health enterprise, when you think about healthcare and life sciences as large businesses, they don't modify themselves quickly from a process perspective. It's not easy if you're in IT at one of these massive healthcare companies to change the way people do their job. And so this was a particular point of pride for us, um, because we made it very easy for them to adopt it. They just added this additional step. Every change will go through this funnel, this AI evaluation based on all the context we have. Um, and you just have to turn it on and then listen to it. And this was a challenging customer because they dealt with the realities of operating in the regulatory environment and everything else that you have to tackle when you're in, a big healthcare enterprise. Um, they turned it on, and I know this one, it was a rolling start to the year. They didn't implement it on January 1st. Um, and so we've already been able to have this massive impact on them in terms of the reduction in outages because healthcare, large life sciences companies, they're incredibly responsible from an infrastructure maintenance, from an application development perspective. They're very methodical and they actually have very good processes for deploying things. And so they really had isolated the things that cause incidents to change. Their architectures were solid, all their processes were solid. And so that 45% reduction in outages is because, like Gartner always says, most or most incidents in the future will be caused by change. Well, that was very true for this enterprise. And so we had an outsized impact on them. And they did it without asking everybody in the organization to enter your data into this tool or system. We just integrated with their process, and so it was very rewarding for I think our team because they spent a ton of time with these folks,
Mhm.
getting it to work and integrating, digesting and indexing a massive amount of organizational history and operational history and topology from this org. And so it was like, okay, we can operate at scale. For us, on the development side, I think this one said, yep, it works even in really big, really regulated environments.
Mhm. I mean, 45% reduction in outages
Yeah.
just based on change within a year. It's pretty impactful. It's almost too good to be true. Uh, Here's another example of another company, global hospitality. Is this an outlier, Jason, or is this really what customers can expect when they automate change risk management?
You can see the volume there. I think 28,000 annual changes. And up top, you kind of have the breakdown in terms of how we risk rated them. There is a tiny sliver of those 28,000 that you can't even see it. It's in that top chart, but there's a little bit of red high risk. It's a very, very small percentage of changes. These guys, again, great organization, and they're a lot of fun to work with. Really, I can't say their name because of reasons, but um, they're doing a great job. They run a great operation, and so we started evaluating their changes, and that to me, like 28,000 during a year, um, is and we rolled it out progressively, kind of team by team, group by group, because you got to convince people that just says that they're mostly doing what they should, but because 1% of 28,000 is a lot of changes still that are high risk. And so when you consider that, then you see the impact on that chart on the bottom, which is that 28% reduction. We just brought down the line of overall service disrupting changes. And because we knew they were high risk, that the fourth bullet down, 36% reduction in MTTR. Very, very quickly, you can get from, hey, we pushed a change and an incident happened, you can connect those two dots because our system has really good situational awareness of your observability as well. And you can just roll back that change. It's a very simple recovery at that point. So even in the reactive stage of things where you're reacting to an incident, it helps reduce the time to resolve. And
Mhm.
that's what ultimately affects their customers because they're on their app trying to, book a hotel or a vacation somewhere. And
Sure.
that's a continuous business globally for them. And zero false positives. This is software developers trap. If or anybody in the risk business, you are incentivized to rate things as high risk because the consequences of being wrong are fairly severe. If you say everything is high risk, you're never wrong. But that creates a whole lot of work for people to reduce the risk. And so if it's not real, you cause a lot of problems organizationally, and people lose faith in the system, and they won't believe what you're putting out. And so zero false positives is I think almost integral to the design of this type of solution.
Right. All right. I have one last question for you, Jason. Then we'll open up to the audience. So, audience, keep your questions coming. This is live, so we'll be able to respond to them. Um, this is all great, very exciting, and I think in the mind of our audience and customers, they're thinking this seems like a big project. Like I gotta, get wide buy-in. I gotta get all this data. This is gonna take me a year. I've done things like this before and it hasn't worked out, and I'm going to associate my, you know, political capital on getting something like this rolled out, and I don't think it's going to work. Why is onboarding something like this different? How is adoption different than traditional IT software purchases?
There's a few things. One is our data connectors are very fast, and almost in hours, we're going to start developing that digital replica of your organization. That context graph comes together very, very quickly for us, and you can start to interact with it very quickly. Um, and so, there's not a huge lift. I agree with you. Getting permission is honestly one of the toughest things in large organizations. But sometimes, with this global hospitality corporation, um, they had embedded a whole bunch of domain expertise in chat channels in Slack. And so we ingested that once we got permission and discovered a whole bunch of relationships that otherwise no one would know because they came out of conversations in incident threads. And so um, it was very easy for them to start because they came in fairly open to looking at that because they're a great design partner. Um, but for any enterprise, I would say, getting started is the hardest part because once you build that ITKG for the organization, you simply need to turn it on and then it's accessible via a web console. There's no change in your change processes. There's no modification. Like all the teams don't have to submit their changes in a new way. We integrate with the existing ITSM or CI/CD pipes or whatever you're using to push changes, which is almost always multiple different systems, and then we look at each one as it comes through, as it's scheduled. Um, and then we give you a very simple way to look at those, to organize those, to filter those. So you can look at maybe if you're one of those distributed teams, you can look at your changes.
Mhm.
And we can automate the feedback via chat. If you're a chat ops company, um, we can push it in the format that you desire with the level of granularity you desire. Um, with very, very little friction. We really try to act just like another person at your company. Our AI agent is out there doing change risk for you, and he's going to try to keep you safe. He's going to try to do his job. Uh, and so we've really tried to minimize the organizational lift and the political capital that you need to expend to get this thing implemented. And I think we've been very successful because even healthcare is always healthcare and financial services. Those are the two that it's just you are pushing a big rock up a very steep hill in most cases trying to get change to happen. Um, and we have both now with this product, and And so I think for everyone else, it is that much easier. But because it makes an impact, that usually makes it very easy to justify. Uh,
Correct.
yeah, because
Yeah.
it's clear and present. Like, yeah, of course I want to cause less incidents with my changes.
Right. And you don't have to set up hundreds of rules that can change when anything else changes. The IT knowledge graph dynamically understands what's happening and can apply reasoning to what is happening in the current state of your business. I think this perspective of change is like it's a reflection of you don't have to set up rules anymore. And you won't hallucinate and you won't have false positives and it will be successful. And it doesn't take 6 months or a year with heavy PS engagement. It's a whole new way of thinking about buying software and IT.
Yeah, yeah, rules. I think the age of trying to anticipate and enact in a rule set every potential scenario, I think those are coming to an end, or at least they've reached their limit. And there's now that you have AI and it can reason on its own with pretty general instructions, try to keep changes from causing incidents in this case. Like now that you can direct an AI to do that and give it the context it needs, um, it's very, very straightforward to configure initially. And from that moment, from day one, you just get better from then on.
Hmm.
And that's a very different experience than most traditional platforms and solutions where it was a learn what the rules do and to try to put your logic and your way of thinking and your prediction of how failure scenarios are going to occur, try to convert that into a rule set for automation to run. Tags and rules, tags and rules. And yeah, it's actually super refreshing, I think, for anybody in the industry because
I
that
think we're going to have a future webinar on this one.
yeah, I'm sure we are. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jason. Audience, feel free to ask your questions. I see some of them come in. The first question here, Jason, is regarding caps. I'm interpreting the question here a little bit. Have you seen the customers say that this replaces caps or augments them? What is the role of a change manager with the customers who've been using this?
It's I for a change manager that brings incident prevention and change risk management into their organization, um, they're now super powered. And so the cab still needs to happen. You still need to manage your changes going out. You still need to do deconfliction and you still need to do all those communications. But now you can do it for real. And so what we've done is build a, super powered exoskeleton, an Iron Man suit for your change manager. And he can be a superhero in terms of the depth of knowledge and the precision of feedback that he gives all those teams. Um, he he can really do his job at a whole different level. And this is what we see across. I mean, we're not the only ones to experience this. Uh, we have where we see that there's a million examples, but radiology and legal are two other areas where if you give a person trying to do a very clear job um, a new tool that has AI baked into it and a ton of context, they are able to do their job much, much better. And
Mhm.
so we don't replace them, we augment them to the extent that um, they can have the impact that most people want to have at the end of the day.
Okay. Next question. Um, in an organization, some business units or might have different varying levels of quality or different varying levels of risk. Like I know we have one customer that one BU has great CIs in their CMDB, the other one is terrible. And they want to have one platform to manage all change, but there's different levels of risk assessment that they want to apply because there's different processes and practices. How does the IT knowledge graph or how does this system or capability work within those kind of constraints?
Well, two ways. One, if you have kind of very strict teams with very, very rock solid kind of documentation process, CMDB presence, and a deep understanding of their architecture and everything else, the system's going to contrast that when it goes to the ITKG with teams that have a lot less of that. And so, of course, you consider the extent of data that that is available to evaluate a change. So if I have very little context around something, I'm going to be a lot less sure. And most AI and ML express that in terms of a confidence interval. But that just comes out naturally. I don't see a lot about this team. This is the first change they've ever pushed, and we don't know what their service architecture is. But here's what I can tell from very limited information. And so that's going to come out in the risk evaluation. But the other thing is, um, you can actually separate out, like let's say it's an entire business unit. We can evaluate them by a different set of customer defined criteria. Basically, the way a human cab would do it, hey, scrutinize this group a lot more because they're fast and loose. We can
Hmm.
bake that into the assessment. And it comes out if they have any sort of operational history. If they have a history of pushing changes that bring services down, the risk component of that and the kind of aggregate, performance there is going to come out in the overall risk scoring. And it's going to be highlighted specifically like this team has a bad record when it comes to making changes. And so that both of those come out and they're very straightforward. And I think critically, because it's an AI saying it on the basis of data, it is objective. It's not a human criticizing another team's processes. It's an AI saying, well, because of this history and because of the context I have around you, and your team when it comes to making changes, here are the facts. And they're very fair and they're very actionable. If you want to correct that, improve your record, you know. There is definitely recency baked in. Like if they had 3 years of bad history, then got a new lead on the team and started improving things, then we're going to see their recent trajectory is really, really good. And again, I go back to the power of AI to consider kind of multiple facets simultaneously in a way people can't. It is super powerful that way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I see we're getting at time. Francesca, do we have any other questions come in or?
I believe the slide was the last question, but we do have a couple more poll questions that I thought we would share with the
Sure.
audience before we sign off. So
Okay.
the second poll question is, how does your organization assess change risk today? And I hope all of you will take the poll. If you're having trouble seeing it, you can click on the button for polls and quizzes below. If you still don't see it, you can click on the More button and you should find it there. It looks like some of you are starting to take the poll. We want to hear your uh, opinions on this, so please do share with us, and we'll give you a couple more seconds to respond. And also, you have a couple more minutes if you'd like to ask a question, please do so now.
I think it's more like, what would you like to do now after saying this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very, very good point. Okay, we're going to end the poll here and we'll share the results, and the two of you can see what you think about this. It looks like a mix of the above is the answer that has reigned supreme. So,
Not surprising. Yeah, it's pretty
yeah.
consistent. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Great. We have one more poll question. If everyone will bear with us and answer. The importance of modernizing. How critical is modernizing IT change management for your organization in the next 12 to 18 months? And we'll give you a few more seconds to respond. I hope you'll all let your voices be heard. While we're waiting for you to answer, also, please check out the resources. You can click on the resources button on your menu below, or you can look it back in the live chat because I did share the links with you a couple of times, and we can do that again as well. So I hope you'll all do that. And I wanted to also let you all know you'll be able to look at this on demand after the fact. We're going to end the poll now and share the results. And it looks like it is important. 63% said that. Any thoughts?
I I think most people are seeing the train on the tracks because the economics have changed. That the pace is going to increase, not decrease. Organizations, especially large enterprise, are going to push more and more changes because everybody can vibe code, and it's starting to dip into config as code, and so things feel like they are moving faster because they are. And so modernizing the process that manages all those changes, yeah, of course they're going to jump on that.
Yeah.
Low-hanging fruit. The pain is acute across any business.
Yep. And maybe in another webinar or two, there'll be more people saying it's mission critical, right? Would that be your judgment?
Uh, yeah, I mean, if you knock everything else out and you're doing everything perfectly, change is the source of all your problems. And so, for especially for mission critical or business critical services, updating change management processes will be seen more and more as a must do.
Yeah, that is what we see at PEX Network or when we do surveys, when we have these kinds of events or webinar series as well. It's definitely the pain point. I'm going to stop sharing that. Did you get to the question about AI flags? What happens when AI flags changes high risk, but engineers believe it's safe? I wasn't sure.
Uh, no,
Okay,
but
would you
that
like to answer that one? We have that one on hand here.
sure. If there's a disagreement between an engineer who has probably very unique domain expertise, he might know something that we don't. Um, and so, of course, we leave it up to the organization to make the decision there. Um, the over time will improve the model, and that's one thing that we have baked in is um, if if an engineer knows something that the ITKG that isn't in the ITKG, we try to collect that through tacit knowledge and learning and verify that with that engineer. And then maybe we map some new relationships or we remove some that maybe we inherited from a CMDB that's out of date or some other system. Um, if the engineer's wrong and that change blows up, which we have seen, um, and that hopefully we make a believer out of that engineer and he takes a second look. But I have a ton of empathy for anybody who's trying to make changes on large services because they are so complex. I don't think there's any one individual that understands how the whole stack works at a big company these days.
And you know what another thing we're all seeing, and I'm sure you would agree, there's going to be this kind of collaboration between AI and the human engineers, and that's just going to become a more perfect union as we move
Yeah,
on, hopefully. So.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. We have time for one more question if you can take it. What tools do you have or need integrations with this for it to work? I think you talked a little bit about some of the integrations earlier, and how do teams manage change risk when they don't have full visibility into service dependencies?
It's a great question. So we what we do is we tap into your ITSM to get the operational history, and then wherever whatever your system of record is around incidents and your system of record around changes, we're gonna tie into both of those, and we're gonna look at all those records, and then we index and graph and embed, convert to vectors, convert to graph data. Now, if there's limited data, which there's always limited data, that's why you need people because they have a whole bunch of understanding that is not written down anywhere. Um, then you're going to start getting better from day one. Because, like I said, we do tacit knowledge collection, and in a lot of cases, somebody has written something down, but it's somewhere hard to access. It's in a knowledge management system, or it's in that RCA or postmortem. And then what we see is organizations start to unpack all of those documents, and it's very easy for us to ingest them. Text data is unstructured data um, chat data. All of that is really straightforward. So we've built a very wide aperture for you to submit data. If your CMDB is not up to date, you are just like everyone else. And and that's just the way things are. And we don't assume that, this is perfection because I think the new model is not to have a rock solid, very rigorously maintained and curated map of your architecture. It's to try to keep up with the rolling wave that is large
Yeah.
enterprise services and have a dynamic system which that's what the ITKG is, that overwrites itself and corrects itself on the basis of both submitted data and observed reality, empirical evidence from incidents that indicates you don't have any relationship between these two things, but they always fail together. And
Right.
one seems to be causing it to the other. And so there is a relationship there that we won't define precisely, but we will say how significant the relationship is. Um, and that's kind of the observed reality that most engineers, this is the amazing thing, most people at large enterprise have a great sense for that. They don't
Yeah.
go to the CMDB to check, hey, what are those relationships? They think about what that service stack is doing, what requests are processing through it, and where that flow could potentially fail. And people have an outstanding graph in their head, which is why, sometimes you'll page that one engineer and they will be like, oh, it's this. And
Right.
they
Right.
instantly know, and it's not written down everywhere, and everybody on the bridge just says, wish I had known that earlier.
Right. And this makes us all hopeful because we're not replacing humans. We're having a conversation about the very importance of both working together, the technology and the humans working together. This was a great webinar. Thank you for the applause that some of you are shouting out in the live chat. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I know some of you are asking about on demand and the recording. Look out in your email. You will receive an email since you are registered for this when the recording is available, and we will be putting it online. People can still register and they'll be able to see it on demand as well if you'd like to share this with any of your friends or colleagues. At this time, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Great audience, great speakers. Thank you, Adam and Jason, and BigPanda. I hope you'll all join us for our upcoming webinars and all access webinar series. We have a webinar on the new KPIs to measure in the age of AI next week. And on February 10th, we will gather for all access future business process management. It's a must see. I hope you'll all join us again. These are free, so it's a great opportunity for community gathering and conversation. I hope to see you all again very soon. Thanks again. Bye bye.